The day had finally come. Claire picked up her bags, relieved that she didn't have too many things to carry. A few maids noticed her quiet demeanor and asked if something was wrong, but she turned away without replying. At the mansion, the Duke asked the maids if Claire had already left. One of them nodded and handed him a letter she had left behind. It was a divorce agreement. The Duke stared at it in disbelief, unable to fully comprehend what he was reading. Meanwhile, Claire sat in the departing carriage, gazing out the window. I wonder if he has finally found the one he truly loves. At the same time, she realized her mind was still on him. Despite everything, it still felt as if she had met him only yesterday. Sometime earlier, at a banquet, a group of noble women murmured among themselves about Duke Ian's arrival. "I'll admire his presence as he passes by," one whispered. The Duke was considered accomplished and desirable. The women commented on his early achievements as a knight, and how he managed to balance his duties while commanding a dukedom. Claire, standing quietly in a corner, listened as the noble women speculated on who might win his heart. Her sister, Amelia, called her from across the room. Approaching in her extravagant gown, Amelia teased Claire about spacing out again in the corner, suggesting that perhaps it suited her plain attire. She asked if Claire had seen the Duke, saying she would like to meet him. As Amelia walked away, a butler approached Claire. "Are you part of the Marquis Maurice family?" he asked. Surprised, Claire looked up and asked if someone was looking for her. The butler simply nodded and gestured for her to follow him. Upon arriving at one of the mansion's rooms, the butler informed Claire that they were waiting for her inside. She stepped in and saw the Duke standing there, apparently expecting someone. Before she could speak, he greeted her. "Nice to meet you, Lady Claire. I'm from the Ducal family. I have an important matter to discuss with you, which is why I asked you to come here." Claire listened carefully as the Duke outlined his proposal, her mind racing. Confused, she asked him to clarify what he meant. The Duke, noticing her hesitation, explained calmly. "You mentioned something about marriage," Claire said, trying to process the words. "That's correct," he replied. "That is exactly what I am proposing." Claire pinched herself, half convinced she might be dreaming. But the scene before her was real. "You're suggesting this, even though we barely know each other?" she asked, still perplexed. The Duke nodded. "We have met a few times at social events. I will soon turn 25, and my parents are pressing me to marry. Since I inherited the title of Duke, their insistence has grown stronger. If this continues, they might decide to arrange a marriage for me." He paused, then added quietly, "I have someone I've loved since childhood. I even tried to convince my parents that I would get engaged to her and marry within a year, but they disagreed. They want me to marry as soon as possible." Understanding the situation, Claire commented, "Your parents are probably worried that this marriage with your beloved might not happen since she is so far away." Ian took a sip of his tea and then carefully presented his proposal, an agreement to marry Claire for only 1 year, contingent on her understanding of the circumstances. Claire looked at Duke Ian and pinched herself once more, making sure she wasn't dreaming. Honestly, it was hard to believe that the most handsome and popular man in the kingdom would suddenly want to marry someone he barely knew. Finally, she replied, "Even though this story is a bit confusing and hard to believe, I agree to the arrangement." She then asked the question everyone wanted to know, "There are so many women in the world, why did you choose me?" Ian explained there were several reasons, the first and most important being the Maurice family's complicated financial situation. Claire felt a pang of embarrassment as she thought about her family. Once one of the highest-ranking noble families, the Maurices had suffered greatly after a flood 10 years ago destroyed much of their territory. Several businesses set up to recover from the disaster had failed, leaving the family in enormous debt. In other words, the Duke intended this marriage as a form of financial arrangement. "Then why not choose my sister? She is more charming and outgoing," Claire asked. Ian replied thoughtfully, "I consider that, but it is precisely because of her demeanor. While you are always modestly dressed, your sister is extravagant. This agreement would make no sense for someone who does not understand your family situation." Impressed by his reasoning, Claire realized that he had carefully studied all possibilities and understood the consequences of his actions. She agreed with his logic. "Will the reward for this contract be financial support for my family?" she asked. "Yes," Ian confirmed. "A payment will be made to restore your family's failed businesses as part of the marriage arrangement, along with ongoing support after the year ends." Surprised, Claire asked, "Am I really worth that much?" Ian smiled slightly. "It's more than that. This 1 year is very important to me." Claire realized just how much he must love that other girl. Surprisingly, he seemed far more romantic than she had expected. She was struck by the fact that he did not ask for a dowry or any formal benefits from her family. He only requested that she act as the Duchess for a year before the marriage would end in divorce. It dawned on her that he wanted her to move into his mansion and truly fulfill the role of Duchess during that time. He added that, of course, he would assist her in every way possible. Then he asked what Claire thought of the agreement. After all, it was a good deal for her family, And if everything went smoothly, she would not only secure financial support for them but also receive a personal reward from him. Claire commented on his generosity. She understood that after a noblewoman divorced, many returned to their parents' home, where the family usually arranged a new marriage of their choosing. Ian reassured her that, if necessary, his family's influence could help arrange a suitable match for her. He would also do his best to prevent gossip so she could continue attending social events without embarrassment. That is very generous of you, Claire said. Ian nodded. I know the weight this will place on your life. This arrangement is the best I can do to help you. Claire replied, hearing you say that, it does sound kind and sincere. Ian shook his head slightly. A truly kind man wouldn't make this kind of proposal, he said. Then, after a pause, he added, if there's anything else you want, a house, money, anything you feel would make this year worthwhile, you can ask for it. Claire realized just how considerate and passionate he was. After a short pause, she agreed to the arrangement, but with one condition. She wanted Ian himself to convince her parents of the marriage. Surprised, he asked, is that all you wish for? I think so, Claire replied. Ian smiled faintly. I don't believe your parents would refuse a marriage proposal from a duke, he said, then agreed to her terms. The protagonist commented that if she could gain her parents' approval, she would accept the marriage, correcting herself from the word agreement to marriage. A few days after the arrangement was established, the duke had already begun preparations. A letter arrived at Claire's home, stating that he wished to discuss something with her parents. Before she knew it, the day of Ian's visit had arrived. Claire noticed that the household was unusually agitated by his arrival. As she hung the laundry with her calloused hands, she thought this reaction was understandable. After all, she hadn't told her parents anything, partly because she had entrusted this matter to Duke Ian, and partly because she knew her parents would hardly believe her if she had tried. In the drawing room, the Duke thanked Claire's parents for taking the time to receive him. I would like to request your permission to marry your daughter, he said, leaving both the Marquis and Marchioness stunned. The Marquis, still trying to process the words, asked him to repeat the proposal to ensure he had heard correctly. The Duke confirmed it and added, I hope I am suitable in your eyes. The Marquis promptly instructed the butler to call Claire immediately, while the Duke thought to himself how easy the task had been. From what Claire had told him the other day, he had expected it to be much more difficult. A few minutes later, the door opened, and Amelia entered, elegant as ever. She introduced herself politely and apologized for keeping him waiting. Her parents were visibly proud, impressed that their daughter had such a relationship with the Duke. Meanwhile, Ian realized that Amelia misunderstood the situation. Amelia, addressing the Duke, remarked that she hadn't realized how he felt and perhaps he should have told her earlier. Ian, however, was not referring to Amelia. He was there to request Lady Claire's hand in marriage. Everyone in the room was shocked that such a plain girl could become the Duchess. Realizing the misunderstanding, Ian stood and left the room. The family quickly followed, hoping to understand the situation. While walking through the mansion, Ian realized that something felt off since the moment he arrived. Despite the family's apparent financial difficulties, the furniture was unusually luxurious. Clearly, if they sold some of these paintings, they could probably buy several dresses for their daughter. At the end of the corridor, he finally spotted Claire passing by. There you are, my beloved, he said as he approached her. Claire, embarrassed, didn't quite know how to respond. Amelia, irritated, demanded an explanation. Claire calmly confirmed that Ian's words were true and that she had accepted his marriage proposal, which only fueled her sister's annoyance. The Marquis, ignoring Amelia, asked the Duke if he was sure Claire was the one he wanted to marry. Ian confirmed once again. He explained that Claire's family could not afford a dowry at the moment, but reassured them that one would not be necessary. If I have Claire, I need nothing else, he said. He also informed them that the wedding was scheduled for the following month, leaving the Marquis with little choice but to agree. Turning to Claire, Ian spoke affectionately, I can't wait for our marriage, saying this in front of her family, who was still trying to process the situation. A few minutes after Ian left, Amelia vented her anger on Claire, attempting to persuade their father to reject the proposal. She even mentioned that she had expected her parents to marry Claire off to a wealthy merchant. Claire, though used to such treatment, still felt hurt by her sister's words. Her father remained passive, and her mother, who had never defended her, seemed indifferent. Claire knew her mother resented her birth had been difficult, and she had been a girl instead of the boy her mother had hoped for. In contrast, Amelia had been a charming baby, earning their mother's full affection. Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a sharp slap from Amelia, who demanded why it had to be Claire. 1 month later, the wedding took place as planned. Claire was relieved, knowing that Amelia's mistreatment would only intensify, while her mother continued to appease the spoiled girl with new dresses. Despite this, Claire was proud that she had endured the difficulties and still appeared presentable on her wedding day, hiding her calloused hands with gloves. After the ceremony, Claire collapsed into bed, exhausted from the day's events, and marveled at the comfort of her new room compared to her old home. The Duke entered, joking, "My wife is quite bold already," in bed. She quickly got up to apologize, and he laughed, assuring her he was only teasing. "You can relax," he said. From that day forward, they would be together for 1 year. Claire formally said, "Please take care of me. I will do my best to fulfill my duties. This year is very important so that you can be with the person you truly love in the future." Ian, still playful, remarked that being called husband made it feel like they were newlyweds. The Duke instructed Claire to rest in her room while he would sleep in his office. He added that the dress he had ordered would likely arrive the next day. Claire tried to convince him to stay in the room, offering to sleep in the study instead, but Ian refused. Only after she thanked him and accepted did he relent. That night, as she tried to sleep, Claire wondered why they weren't sharing a bed. Perhaps, she thought, sleeping beside someone you loved would feel different, and she wondered if one day someone who truly liked her would appear. The next day, Claire was awakened by a knock on her door. A maid informed her it was already past noon and asked if she wanted to rest more. Claire declined, saying she had rested enough and would get ready. Looking over the few dresses she had brought, the maid asked if the rest of her clothes would arrive soon. Claire explained that these were all she had, and she was used to dressing herself. Concerned, the maid asked if she would wear one of these dresses, noting that the previous duchess had been meticulous about her appearance. Claire noticed that while the staff treated her respectfully, there was still a subtle harshness in their tone. After all, a plain woman had suddenly appeared as the Duke's wife. Later, a butler introduced himself without giving his name. Claire found it odd but dismissed it, asking if he could teach her how to manage the household. He refused, saying she only needed to take care of herself and rest. Realizing cohabitation might not be so easy, Claire decided to explore the mansion to familiarize herself with it. She knew she could not remain idle. Having lived as a servant, her calloused hands reminded her of the work she was used to. Perhaps if she applied herself, she could earn the hands of a duchess. As she walked through the corridors, she overheard maids gossiping, questioning her background and her intentions. They mocked her plain dresses and suggested she was only after the Duke's wealth. Claire thought that if it were her sister, she would have reacted angrily, but she chose to ignore their insults. In the garden, Claire admired the well-maintained grounds. She suspected the former duchess had taken meticulous care of the mansion. While reflecting on her new responsibilities, she noticed a maid struggling with a large pile of laundry. Claire approached her and introduced herself simply as Claire. The maid, introducing herself as May, explained that the other maids had assigned her the work but she couldn't manage it alone. Claire offered to help, and together they developed a faster method, even enjoying the work while Claire asked May about the household dynamics. May explained that she had been working under the head maid, Madame San, who imposed an unreasonable workload. As they were finishing, Claire noticed Ian standing behind her. Startled, she slipped, but he caught her before she fell. Once back in her chambers, Claire apologized. Ian explained that he had come earlier because the new dresses had arrived and because his colleagues suggested he stay home like a proper newlywed. He asked what she had been doing in the garden, and Claire, embarrassed, hesitated, worried he might think her unfit to be a duchess. Before she could respond, Madame San scolded her for staining the dignity of the Duke's family with such behavior. May stepped in, taking the blame and explaining that Claire had simply helped her finish on time. Claire was surprised and grateful. It was the first time someone had defended her. Determined, Claire stood her ground, stating that if the story of her helping spread, it would reflect disloyalty among the staff, not her. Ian, pleased, said the situation was resolved. Claire then mentioned that she had spent the day walking around the mansion and noticed how busy everyone seemed. She asked if she shouldn't help. The butler explained that Madame San assigned duties. Claire decided that starting tomorrow, someone else should replace her and question San's competence, noting that she had imposed an unreasonable workload on a novice. San tried to justify herself, but Claire pointed out that other maids were gossiping instead of helping. Before the conversation escalated further, the doorbell announced the arrival of a visitor, and Claire apologized to Ian for taking up his time. He smiled, expressing happiness that he could count on her for the household's affairs. As the servants left, Claire asked May to stay and requested that Ian allow her to keep May as her personal maid. He suggested she choose a more experienced servant, but Claire insisted she felt more comfortable with May. Seeing Claire smile at her decision, the Duke realized that in just 3 days since the wedding, his new wife had already shown she was proactive, determined, and very different from what he had imagined. One day in his office, Ian was lost in thought when the phone rang. It was Keith Foner, the king's younger brother. He teased Ian, saying his face was glowing like a newlywed. Ian replied, asking if he looked foolish. Keith laughed, reminding him it was only a 1-year marriage contract. Ian explained that he wasn't in love, he just found Claire far more interesting than he had expected. Keith recalled how quiet Claire had seemed on the wedding day and guessed she had been reading a book. Ian corrected him, saying he had searched the entire mansion and only found her in the garden, barefoot and washing clothes with a maid. Both men laughed, noting that they had never seen a noblewoman do such a thing. Ian added that Claire had even removed Madame San from her position. Keith suggested keeping an eye on her so she didn't run off, but Ian assured him he would protect her. Claire, he realized, was braver and more capable than he had imagined, which piqued Keith's curiosity to meet her. Back at the mansion, the day the dresses arrived, Ian explained that he had bought some ready-made dresses for now, but a tailor would take her measurements. He invited Claire to have dinner with him, so she could wear one of her new dresses. Claire felt awkward about getting the dress dirty so soon but agreed. While she changed, Ian overheard her conversation with May in the next room. Claire asked May to be careful with the new dresses, explaining how meaningful this first proper dress was to her. Despite coming from a noble family, her family had been poor, and she had always relied on old clothes to create new ones. Ian realized she hadn't fully expressed her happiness and that she sometimes hid her emotions. He found it endearing, though he didn't yet realize he had already fallen for her. The next day, May apologized for spilling lunch while carrying it, noting that no other food had been prepared. Claire told her not to worry, saying she had eaten enough and would just have tea. She also suspected that, given Madame San's dismissal the previous day, the missing lunch was likely an act of retaliation. Determined not to let May be punished, Claire accepted the tea. Noticing May's red eyes, Claire invited her to join her for tea. May hesitated but eventually agreed. Watching May prepare the tea, Claire recalled her childhood, drinking tea with her grandmother, the only person who had truly cared for her. May asked nervously if the tea was good. Claire reassured her, happy that someone had made it just for her. Realizing that May hadn't eaten, Claire suggested they go for a walk to distract themselves. Claire worried about dirtying her new dress, but May reassured her it could be washed later. In the garden, Claire admired the beautifully maintained red roses, remembering how much Ian's mother loved them. Surrounded by the flowers, she felt momentarily at ease, though the thorns reminded her of her position, just a substitute, nothing special. In the following days, the missing meals continued, likely because the staff wanted to prevent Claire from interfering in the mansion's affairs. Claire understood that constantly bothering her husband over minor issues would worsen others' impressions of her. She apologized to May for putting her in this situation, though May insisted it wasn't Claire's fault. Breakfast became Claire's opportunity to eat properly, and she noticed May still hadn't eaten. Cleverly, Claire asked if she could take the rest of the food to May's room. Ian agreed and instructed the maids to help, but Claire insisted on carrying it herself. On the way to May's room, Ian asked if she had adjusted to the mansion. Claire replied that she liked the garden but worried that her husband always worked late. Ian admitted awkwardly that he often lost track of time when focused. Claire reassured him not to worry, reminding him it was just a contract marriage. In May's room, Claire offered the bread. Though May initially refused, hunger prevailed, and she accepted. Claire felt responsible and wanted to help her maid. That night, Claire admitted she was still hungry, and May apologized for not bringing enough. Claire remembered her childhood, when Amelia's abuse sometimes left her without food for days. Determined, she decided to cook for them at midnight. When they arrived in the kitchen, May was skeptical that her madam could cook. Claire reassured her, recalling her experience cooking in the past. Tonight, at least, they would not go hungry. Sometime later, Claire was preparing a stew with some ingredients while May watched, a little suspicious. She commented on how impressed she was that Claire really knew how to cook. Claire then shared her story. In her family home, there were times she went 3 days without eating. To survive, she waited until everyone slept, gathered whatever leftover ingredients she could find, and taught herself to cook, crying as she wondered what would happen if anyone discovered her. May was shocked. She had grown up relying on her noble father after her mother's death, and she felt ashamed comparing herself to Claire, who had endured so much alone. Claire, noticing May's discomfort, reassured her. As long as we're together, you'll eat every day. She sang lightly while cooking, and May felt delighted to witness such a cheerful side of her mistress. Claire joked that she had just made up the lyrics, and maybe one day she could become a singer, traveling the world. May hesitated, asking if the Duke would be upset if Claire left. Just then, Ian entered the kitchen, making Claire startle, though she managed to remain upright this time. He laughed at the scene, and Claire, trying to act natural, commented that he arrived early. Internally, she wondered how he always seemed to appear at the worst moments. She apologized for not greeting him sooner. Ian asked what she was doing, and Claire explained that she was cooking. He noted how happy she seemed. Curious, he asked if the house had a cook, and Claire said that, since no one else had been around, she decided to do it herself. May tried to lie, saying Claire insisted, but Claire gently corrected her. She explained she hadn't eaten since morning and was simply very hungry, which is why she had used the kitchen without permission. Ian asked why she hadn't eaten lunch, and feigning innocence, Claire asked if lunch was normally served in the house. Only then did it dawn on Ian that she had been skipping meals except when with him. He questioned the servants, who remained silent. Claire intervened, suggesting they eat first before continuing the conversation. During the meal, Ian complimented the food, though only managing to say the steak was thick. Later, he admitted the soup was very good. Claire, unconvinced, told him it was fine to say it was tasteless. Ian smiled and said everything was excellent because she had put her effort into it. Claire realized he had likely seen most of what happened in the kitchen, which embarrassed her, though he noted she had seemed happy and enjoyed herself. Ian explained he had come home earlier because his colleagues told him to, and Claire's previous concern for him working late made her happy. She hoped this meant the food deprivation would end. After dinner, Ian asked about her missed meals and who was responsible. The servants tried to shift the blame onto Claire, who feigned innocence and agreed lightly. When one maid, Annie, was accused, Claire asked Ian if Annie could work exclusively for her. He was puzzled, but Claire explained, "Isn't serving someone you dislike the wise punishment?" Ian accepted her request. The next day, at work, Keith noticed Ian in a particularly good mood. Curious, he asked what had happened. Ian recounted the previous evening. Claire had been cooking while singing, and the moment had been magical and unforgettable. Keith remarked that she was truly remarkable for committing herself so fully to a role, even cooking for her fake husband. Ian corrected him. The servants had been conspiring against her, withholding meals, and Claire had still found the strength to cook for herself. Keith was impressed by her resilience, and Ian explained that, since he needed her for the year, he had tried to punish the servant responsible. Remarkably, Claire refused and requested that the maid work directly under her. She reasoned that the maid was loyal to the family and could not have acted out of malice, so firing her would have been wasteful. Keith commented on how fascinating Claire was, and Ian agreed. Initially, he had only proposed marriage because she was the best candidate, but now his impression of her was changing. She washed clothes with a smile, cooked while singing, and carried herself with unexpected strength. The only thing he couldn't understand was the moments when her smile seemed to hide her true self. Keith asked when he could meet this incredible young woman. Ian replied that, with her new dress having arrived, it would probably be at the next banquet. As soon as Ian arrived home, Claire was there to greet him, looking every bit the dutiful wife. The poor Duke was momentarily speechless. His heart couldn't quite handle the sight. Recovering, he told her he had arrived early and asked if she would attend a banquet with him in 2 weeks. Holding his coat, Claire accepted the invitation, noting that it would be her first public duty as a wife. The truth, however, was that Claire felt nervous. This would be her first real social event among the other nobles, and she didn't know how to dance. She lay awake that night, worried about managing in front of so many eyes. Perhaps she should hire a dance teacher, but when Amelia learned, it had taken 2 years to find one. And dancing required a partner, which couldn't be another woman. Claire had no idea how to proceed. The next morning, as Ian left for work, Claire pondered how she might find a dance partner in less than 15 days. On her way back to her room, she noticed a maid carrying Ian's clothes from the previous day. She asked the maid to leave them with her. Knowing the Duke was stylish and had plenty of outfits, Claire figured he wouldn't notice a missing set. With a spark of ingenuity, she fashioned a sheet doll from his clothes, her new dance partner. Hugging the doll, she felt something in its pocket, a beautiful, old pen Ian had likely forgotten. She placed it on the table, deciding she would return it later. Now, it was time to start her dance practice. Mimicking what she had seen of Amelia's lessons, Claire tried to follow the rhythm of the birds chirping outside. Unsure if she was doing it correctly, she allowed herself to enjoy the moment, twirling with the doll. As luck would have it, the timing was terrible. Ian entered the room, calling her name. Flustered, Claire pretended she wasn't dancing and bent to pick up the pen, but slipped again. Ian rushed to help her, and they both ended up on the floor. He asked what exactly was happening, and Claire panicked. She realized she had landed in his lap. Embarrassed, she quickly moved away and asked if he was hurt. Ian laughed, assuring her it wasn't difficult. After all, his training kept him fit. He explained he had returned for his pen, and Claire admitted she had found it while picking up his clothes. She intended to return it at night but had started practicing dancing in secret because she was ashamed to admit she had never danced before, despite attending other social events. Ian listened, impressed that she had never taken lessons nor been asked to dance, and noted that they would likely invite her to dance at the banquet. Even if she refused others, he added, she would need to dance one dance with him. Claire explained that this was exactly why she had made the doll, to practice in private. She worried that, knowing her lack of experience, Ian might want to cancel their contract. He stood, reassuring her that she had nothing to fear. He would personally teach her. Claire hesitated, concerned about how they would manage given his busy schedule. Ian smiled and suggested they practice for an hour each morning before breakfast. This would also help them synchronize for the year's upcoming events. He thanked her for keeping his pen and returned to work, leaving Claire both relieved and motivated, ready to begin her first dance lesson the next morning. After Ian left, Claire felt herself blushing at the thought that he had seen her in such an awkward moment, arguing with the sheet doll. She muttered to herself that it was his fault for making her feel so embarrassed. Hugging the doll tightly, she caught the faint scent of the Duke on the clothes and turned even redder. Later in her room, Claire called the maids to prepare tea in the garden so she could enjoy the roses. Annie, now working personally for Claire, was always very cold, but she performed her duties impeccably. Claire appreciated that, understanding that attachment to the house staff would be unnecessary since her marriage was only for a year. As she walked through the rose garden, Claire marveled at how privileged she was to enjoy tea in such a beautiful place. She remembered putting her dance partner, the sheet doll, in the closet to prevent anyone from discovering it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a scream, Annie reprimanding May for making the tea incorrectly. To diffuse the tension, Claire asked May to fetch some appetizers to accompany their tea. Once the two were alone, Claire reflected that Annie seemed a bit harsh. May explained coldly that Annie's strictness came from concern for her training rather than malice. Claire realized Annie's sternness was meant to guide and teach May, helping her grow into a competent maid. She encouraged Annie to continue her efforts, saying that May would benefit greatly from her guidance. Even after Claire left, the two maids would manage just fine. Changing the subject, Claire asked Annie where she could buy makeup. Annie was shocked that her new mistress had never used any before the wedding. Claire explained that she had never found it necessary, and Amelia had always made her believe it wouldn't make a difference. Annie suggested purchasing a full makeup set, and Claire hesitated, thinking she might need her husband's permission. Annie reassured her, explaining that the Duke had imposed no restrictions. She then asked if Claire needed anything else, though the Duchess replied she did not. Annie offered to check her belongings to ensure nothing was missing. Concerned about letting someone who had bullied her touch her things, Claire said it was fine. Someone so quick to betray friends wouldn't act against her. Later, May returned and asked about Annie. Claire explained she had gone to prepare for the ball. Claire reminded herself she had to train carefully, not only with Ian but possibly with the dummy as well. Remembering that Annie was supposed to check her things, Claire panicked, realizing the doll might be discovered. She rushed to prevent Annie from seeing it, but it was too late. Annie's eyes fell on the doll, and May noticed it too. The two maids assumed it was a token of Claire's longing for the Duke, which made her blush even harder. She couldn't explain that the doll was simply for dance practice. Meanwhile, Ian was intensely training in the palace grounds, sweat dripping from his defined abs. He remembered joining the Order of Knights at 18, serving as the Crown Prince's royal guard, and continuing to train even after becoming Duke. Despite leaving the royal guard at 22, he maintained a rigorous training schedule on days he couldn't focus elsewhere. Keith, noticing Ian's discipline, remarked how impressive it was that he trained so early. Ian initially refused to share anything, but eventually admitted it was about Claire. Keith asked if they had argued. Ian shook his head and explained the embarrassing situation. He had returned home unexpectedly after forgetting his pen and clothes, only to find Claire practicing dancing with a sheet doll fashioned from his clothes. It was the first time he had seen a woman move so freely and happily. Keith, observing the scene, asked why she would dance with a doll, noting that his sister always danced with several partners at parties. Ian admitted it seemed strange, but he realized they had probably been raised very differently. He hadn't delved deeply into her past to avoid becoming too attached. Keith continued, remarking that Claire might be more charming than Sophia, the princess he had loved for 10 years. Ian's mind wandered to Sophia, his childhood friend and longtime love, who had been traveling the world since she was 14 under the guise of studying. The king had now ordered her to return within a year. Keith teased him that perhaps he had been clinging to something that no longer existed. The next morning, Claire and Ian began their dance lessons, though progress was slow. Claire was certain she had no natural talent for dancing, while Ian reassured her. "You're too focused on where your foot will land. Just feel the flow," he said. Claire fretted, worried about stepping on his foot. Ian smiled and teased, "There's a good side to stepping on a man's foot. Those who mind won't ask you to dance." She fretted that if she didn't improve, he'd suffer for the next year. He waved it off. "I can endure it, don't worry about me." Even so, Claire felt guilty. Just days ago, Annie had pointed out the things Claire lacked: dresses, shoes, accessories, and the Duke had promptly purchased everything. Ian noted that Annie's keen eye for people was impressive. Noticing Claire looking at her feet again, Ian decided to try a different approach. Holding her chin gently, he instructed, "Dance while looking into each other's eyes and talking." Claire's heart nearly stopped. His beauty made it almost impossible to focus, yet Ian pretended not to notice her reaction. As they practiced, Ian explained the importance of small talk while dancing. He asked if she had grown accustomed to life in the mansion and apologized for the previous food issues. Claire reassured him it was fine. She had chosen not to mention it. She attributed her endurance to her parents' financial situation, avoiding the topic of her harsh upbringing to prevent pity. Curious, Claire asked Ian about the woman he had loved. An awkward silence fell. He admitted that Sophia was a year younger, strong-willed, and destined to be engaged to him due to their family status. Claire commented that they must have been a perfect match in childhood. Ian revealed he had waited 10 years for her, and when asked if that was strange, he replied that perhaps he simply hadn't found the right person until now, subtly hinting that he was already falling for Claire. Ian apologized for sharing such a personal story and involving her, though Claire cut him off. She shared her own history, growing up unloved, often hungry, performing servants' chores. Ian was astonished, asking if she had endured all that alone. Claire explained that her sister had been raised differently, favored by their parents, and given everything, even when they couldn't afford it. Claire never dreamed of a happy marriage, expecting instead to wed a greedy merchant or a much older man. Before she could finish, a blister on her foot caused her to stumble, and she fell into Ian's lap. Her heart raced as she realized her feelings for him. Composing herself, she completed her story. I wasn't in a position to hope for a happy marriage. That's why, no matter what anyone says, to me, you are a hero. The words struck Ian's heart, and he began to blush without realizing it. Claire, thinking he was unwell, panicked and rushed to fetch the doctor. Ian tried to calm her, but she was already gone. After examining him, the doctor confirmed he was fine. Ian bid his wife farewell and went to work, his thoughts lingering on the confession and the warmth of her words. Meanwhile, Claire was still fussing with the doll, now dressed in the new clothes the maids had provided. It had become her comfort, a stand-in for the husband she worried was overworking himself. Spotting paperwork left by the butler regarding mansion affairs, she quickly returned to her duties. Sometime later, a knock came at the bedroom door. "Come in," she called, wondering who it could be. The kitchen chef appeared, holding a large tray of cupcake-like muffins. "An apology for what happened," he said. Claire raised an eyebrow. Noble women valued elegance and presentation, and these plain muffins were far from that. But perhaps, she thought, they were meant for her. After all, her sister had always mocked her for never tasting a proper noble sweet. The scent was irresistible, and Claire tried one. To her surprise, they were delicious. She offered some to the two maids, explaining that the head chef had baked the batch as an apology. May, impressed by the smell and quantity, eagerly accepted, while Annie hesitated, worrying whether it was appropriate to accept such a gift. Claire reassured her. Since the chef had been preparing meals properly since that day, it was fine. Worried they might not eat all the muffins, Annie suggested Claire take some to her husband at work. It would be the perfect excuse to visit him and check on his well-being. Claire felt a flutter of excitement, but also nervousness. She would be going alone, having refused to burden her busy maids. She worried about presenting herself to his colleagues and not appearing like just a temporary duchess. When they arrived at the palace, the coachman abruptly announced he would not wait and left. Claire approached a guard, explaining she was from the Duchy of Edda and had a delivery for Duke Ian. The guard, scrutinizing her, asked for an entry permit, something Claire hadn't expected. Without a permit or royal order, he said, entry was impossible. He asked if she hadn't been informed by the Duke himself. Claire explained she had come unannounced and asked if he could deliver the basket instead, but he refused, claiming Duke Ian received gifts daily and was instructed to reject all of them. This is the first time a Duke's fan has called herself his wife, the guard said. Claire smiled, now realizing that, in her new clothes, she no longer looked dull as the rumor suggested. I really am his wife, she said, but the guard laughed, thinking it a joke. He admitted she was undeniably beautiful, unlike the rumors of her being unremarkable, but without finding the Duke, she couldn't leave. She waited at the gate for an hour and a half. The guard, surprised by her persistence, commented that fans usually gave up, especially since the Duke was in the honeymoon phase. He added that rumors suggested it was a contract marriage, as Claire was considered unusual in high society, and no one understood why Ian had married her. Claire felt relieved. The rumor wasn't that the Duke hated her. The guard continued, noting that if a man truly loved his wife, he would proudly show her to everyone, yet Ian had not. He concluded that Claire was probably just a temporary duchess, but added that she carried herself like a true duchess and any knight would line up to escort her. Claire didn't know whether to feel flattered or embarrassed. Suddenly, the guard stiffened, bowing slightly. Claire looked up to see a young man with golden eyes, Prince Keith. Recognition struck her. She had met him at the wedding. The guard introduced her to the prince, who had not known her name until now. Hesitant, she said, Claire Maurice, or rather, Claire Edda, after marriage. That's why you seem so familiar, Prince Keith said, smiling. He explained he had come because he heard a woman claiming to be Ian's wife was waiting at the gate, though he hadn't imagined it was true. When Claire admitted she had forgotten the entry permit, he reassured her, I'll take you to Ian. Don't worry about the formalities, this place is practically my home. The guard, finally convinced, apologized for his earlier fuss, admitting he had spoken too much. Claire laughed softly, acknowledging that most of what he said was true, and even offered him a cupcake as thanks for keeping her company. Prince Keith couldn't stop laughing at her unique charm, while Claire simply smiled, unaware why it amused him so. She bid the guard farewell and wished him a good day at work, ready to see her husband. Once inside the palace, Prince Keith remarked that he couldn't believe he got to meet her before the banquet. Claire smiled, replying that she was happy to meet him today, especially since he had saved her from rotting away at the gate. She knew that maintaining good terms with the king's younger brother would be important. After all, he and her husband were among the most promising young nobles in high society. Even someone like her, who didn't follow gossip, knew of their reputations. Unlike her husband, the prince had several romance rumors swirling around him, but perhaps because he chose his partners wisely, none ever became a scandal. Keith explained that he had heard a lot about her from the Duke, and added that she could speak formally with him if she wished. Claire politely refused, saying it would be rude since he was royalty. Keith reassured her that it wasn't a problem, especially since she would be Duchess for a year. Claire wondered if he knew about their agreement, or if he was just repeating the rumors she had heard from the guard. She asked if he also thought she and Ian would divorce in a year, just like the guard suggested. Keith, laughing, said that if a divorce did happen, he would help her. Claire asked if he would give her a job if she were abandoned. The prince chuckled, clarifying that it wasn't exactly that kind of help. He simply knew she could cook and take care of household matters. That's when Claire realized he must know everything about the Duke and her, including the contract. She commented that she envied him, having someone she could talk to so freely. Keith was impressed by her composure and kindness, noting that she didn't even seem upset that Ian had shared so much with him. Meanwhile, Ian was in his office, thinking about how much Claire had improved in dancing, though he'd missed seeing her little apologetic expressions when she stepped on his foot. A colleague entered with a report about Claire Maurice, questioning why Ian had been investigating her further. Ian explained that since learning about Claire's upbringing, how she had never learned to dance and had likely been mistreated, he had become concerned. The only person who had cared for her was her grandmother, who had died when Claire was 10. The colleague mentioned rumors that a woman claiming to be the Duke's wife had been waiting at the gate. Ian thought to himself that he'd like to introduce Claire to his colleagues someday, but since she had never come to his workplace, it seemed unlikely. As the colleague left, he ran into Keith entering with a special delivery. Claire appeared behind the prince, apologizing for the intrusion. Ian was surprised. He hadn't expected her to come at all. Keith teased, asking what kind of expression that was, and Ian's heart warmed. His wife had come to see him. Claire explained that she had only come to deliver sweets and would leave immediately afterward. Ian noted that the basket was heavy and that she should have asked someone to carry it, unaware that she had waited 2 hours at the gate. He thanked her, mentioning that it was good timing since everyone was about to take a break. Claire greeted Ian's colleague, thanking him for taking care of her husband, leaving both men impressed by her beauty and elegance. The colleague took the basket to distribute to the others and gently pulled Keith along, leaving Ian and Claire alone. Ian asked if it was true that she had waited at the gate, apologizing for not realizing sooner. Claire reassured him that thanks to the prince, she had managed to deliver the sweets. Ian observed that since they had started dancing lessons, Claire had been showing many expressions, so different from the shy, quiet girl he had first met. Claire commented that the cupcakes were delicious, and Ian offered to have them made every day, though she politely declined. He then mentioned a sweet shop his mother loved and suggested taking her there, imagining how her face would light up seeing all the cakes. As he spoke, Claire worried that coming to his workplace might have been a problem, but Ian reassured her with his kindness. He then asked if she would mind meeting his colleagues. She said she would be delighted. Standing and offering his hand, Ian led her through the office. Introducing Claire as his wife, Ian watched as she greeted his colleagues gracefully, thanking them for taking care of him. Everyone was impressed. She looked nothing like the rumors suggested, and the sweets had been delicious. One colleague noted that since she had come all the way to see Ian, they should spend some time together after work. When they mentioned Ian spending time in the infirmary that morning, Claire immediately checked to see if he had a fever, realizing she might have been a bit forward. She quickly apologized, explaining that she had only been worried. Ian, embarrassed, asked if she really had been concerned about him, and she confirmed it. As they walked toward the palace exit, Claire said she enjoyed meeting everyone. Ian asked where she had left the carriage. When she explained that the coachman had dropped her off and left, he became slightly apprehensive, but she reassured him that it wasn't the young man's intention. Changing the subject, she asked where they were going, and Ian explained that he usually didn't use the main gate. Claire mentioned that the gate guard had told her many women still tried to see him and bring gifts. Ian pretended not to notice but promised that next time she wouldn't need an entry permit, which made Claire delighted. She realized then just how kind he was, even if their relationship was temporary, and felt a warm, deep sense of happiness and relief. Inside the royal carriage, Claire hesitated. "Is it really no problem for me to use the royal carriage?" she asked. Ian smiled reassuringly. "Not at all. It belongs to my best friend." She let out a small sigh of relief. "Thank you for arranging it. I've never ridden a horse before and I was afraid." "If you want, I can teach you someday," he said lightly, adding that when they returned home, he'd have a word with the servants since the coachman had left her behind and because of the cupcakes incident. Claire shook her head. "Just report it. No need to impose drastic punishments. Let's not make the future tense." He frowned but insisted on holding them accountable. Claire could only think how impressive it was that he got so worked up over someone who was only a substitute wife. Upon arriving at the mansion, Claire immediately took charge. "Call the head chef who made today's sweets," she instructed. When he arrived, she asked if he had any idea why he was summoned. I apologize," he stammered. "I thought you liked simple sweets, so I prepared them without meaning any harm." Claire wondered why he had gone to so much trouble for plain cupcakes. Did he enjoy belittling her? Or was it a way to rally others against her? You're mistaken, she said gently. I called you to thank you. The chef blinked in confusion before realizing she meant it. Claire explained that everyone had enjoyed the sweets and she believed that was why he had made so many, to share with others. She added that the lack of frosting actually made them easier to eat at work. Even Ian silently agreed with her logic. What reward should the Duke offer the head chef? She asked. In the Edda household, a salary bonus is customary for good work, Ian replied. Claire thanked the chef and told him to continue setting a good example for others. Claire lightly grabbed Ian's arm. You should rest too, so you don't catch another fever. Ian couldn't tell if she was flirting or simply being considerate, but he smiled anyway. Later, he admitted he was impressed by how she had praised the chef despite his poor intentions. Claire explained she only rewarded the results, not the intent behind them. Ian, however, worried about her well-being. Even though I asked you to play the role of Duchess, I don't want you to suffer. If anything happens, tell me immediately. Of course, she replied cheerfully. Now you should rest. That's why we came home early. Before leaving, Ian handed her a jar. For your hands, he said. Calloused hands are a problem for a duchess. This cream should last a long time. Claire's eyes lit up as she held it, understanding the thought behind it. She shared it with her maids, insisting they apply it every day too, both to care for their hands and to keep up with her routine. At first, Annie and May tried to refuse, but Claire's persistence won out. Annie added practical advice. One of them should always accompany Claire outside to avoid a repeat of the gate incident, and Claire should wear the party shoes a few times a day to make them comfortable. May commented that the two would look beautiful dancing together. Annie also reminded Claire to care for her whole body, not just her hands. Claire hesitated, saying perhaps she'd save it for the banquet, but Annie explained that beauty couldn't be created in a day and urged her to trust the process. Finally, the night of the banquet arrived. A stunning blue dress waited for Claire. Nervous and unable to sleep, she spent the entire night staring at it. In the past, her sister always claimed the best dresses, leaving Claire the subject of ridicule at events. The maids noticed her distracted behavior. Claire admitted she didn't know what would look good or how Amelia always managed to appear flawless at banquets. She decided to ask for makeup like a picture frame, leaving Annie puzzled. Claire explained, Ian is the most handsome man in the kingdom. If I am to stand by his side, I shouldn't steal attention, only frame his beauty. Annie nodded, understanding her intent and promising to do her best. Moments later, May appeared, crying with a ruined shoe. Claire reassured her it was no problem and asked if there was another shoe. Only a new blue one remained, though it was tight from being worn once. Claire smiled. Perfect. I'll wear these for the banquet. Annie promised to uncover who was responsible during the event. Claire agreed, believing destroying others' belongings was wrong. At last, preparations were complete. Claire looked stunning, her makeup flawless, the blue dress perfect. May complimented her beauty, saying she had never looked more radiant. Claire thanked her warmly, even if it was just flattery. The Duke knocked gently on the door. Are you ready? Before leaving, Annie whispered to Claire. Trust me, we weren't just flattering you. Just wait until you see your husband's reaction. As Claire stepped into the room and saw Ian, she was speechless. He looked breathtakingly handsome. It was impossible for anyone to stand out beside him. Suddenly, she understood why so many noble women had been captivated by him, and for the first time, she wondered if she was truly allowed to walk beside someone like that. This is the first time I've dressed up so much in my life, she admitted, a hint of embarrassment coloring her voice. You look beautiful, Ian said softly. For a moment, even he was lost for words. Claire, of course, didn't believe him, thinking he was just putting on a show for the maids. It feels strange to receive direct compliments like that, she murmured. I mean it, he insisted. You truly look beautiful in that dress. Returning the compliment, Claire said, and you look like a noble prince straight out of a painting. Annie nudged her gently. Now you see, they weren't just flattering you. After a few dances, Claire's foot began to ache terribly from the new shoes. She longed to remove them and go barefoot, but her dress wasn't long enough to hide her feet. Just then, Keith spotted her and greeted her warmly. Claire returned the greeting, and he reassured her that she didn't need to be so formal. He commented that the food and drinks were excellent and encouraged her to try some. Claire admitted she didn't like red wine. Noted, Keith said, smiling. I used to always bring wine for the Duke when I visited. Next time, I'll bring something you enjoy too. Then, with a polite bow, he invited her for a dance. Claire hesitated, aware of her sore foot, but it would have been rude to refuse a request from royalty. They began walking toward the hall, but Ian appeared just in time. Unfortunately, this dance will have to wait for another day, he said, stepping between them. Claire immediately ran to Ian, checking if he had a fever. Are you all right? She asked, worried. She quickly apologized to the prince and promised to dance with him another time. Keith kissed her hand in thanks and promised to see her soon. On the way to the carriage, Ian apologized for calling her to leave early. Claire reassured him that she had enjoyed herself and that his health mattered more. "It's a good thing I got you out of there," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "And I lied about feeling unwell." Claire blinked in surprise. "You lied? But are you really okay?" Ian smiled gently. "I noticed your foot hurting. You were walking differently than usual. It wouldn't do to let you suffer." Before she could protest, he placed a hand behind her waist, lifted her effortlessly, and said, "I'm worried about you." Claire's face turned crimson. "Put me down," she stammered. "No," he said firmly. "If it embarrasses you, just close your eyes." Once inside the carriage, Claire apologized again for cutting the night short. Ian told her there was no need. After all, he had called her away and completed all his duties. "I noticed your foot is sore," he said gently. "What happened? You had worn the shoes before, right?" Claire explained that an accident in the morning had ruined her only used shoe, leaving her with a pair she hadn't yet broken in. Ian frowned. "Were the servants mistreating you again?" "No," Claire replied softly. "It was my fault. I didn't take care of them properly." "Don't apologize," Ian said firmly. "Do you know who did this? Will you punish them lightly?" Claire shook her head. "I'll forgive whoever did it. But it won't happen again." Ian, still concerned, instructed her to care for herself and immediately report any future incidents. He promised to resolve the shoe issue, reminding her that the servants must remember whom they serve. The next morning, Claire refused to rise, still thinking about being carried by Ian. A knock on the door startled her. It was Ian. "Good morning. Is it too early to get up?" "I'm just tired," Claire admitted, rubbing her foot. Ian suggested skipping dance practice and simply spending the morning talking. "What should we talk about?" Claire asked. "I want to know about your childhood," Ian said. "Even though we're married, I know so little about you." Claire recounted her life with her grandmother, who had been both kind and strict. "She taught me everything I knew," Claire said. "But she passed away when I was only 10. After that, there was no one to guide me. My family didn't hire a tutor, they spent everything on my sister, Amelia. They promised I could study afterward, but they never kept it." Ian's expression softened. "I'm sorry for making you relive that." Claire shrugged. "It's in the past. But my grandmother's words only made sense after I debuted in society." She explained the lesson her grandmother had given her. Learning isn't just waiting, it's stealing. While her sister had lessons, Claire would clean the office to eavesdrop. Then she'd write down everything she heard after the tutor left. Ian's eyes widened. "I didn't realize your childhood was so difficult." Claire smiled faintly. "It's over now. But it taught me how to survive in high society. I learned by observing the nobles, stealing their mannerisms, and refining them. That's why I always stayed in the corners during parties." Ian felt genuine admiration. "You're incredible. And yet, I feel like I've done nothing, just waited for all this to happen." Claire teased. "You were able to accomplish everything that came your way, that's impressive too. Choosing me, marrying for love, and protecting me." Ian stood, smiling. "I'm very happy to hear more about you. We should do this more often." Their maid called for breakfast. Noticing Claire still walked stiffly, Ian offered to carry her to the table, but she refused. Laughing, he had the servants bring the meal to her room instead. After breakfast, a doctor treated her foot, and Ian bought her new shoes. Then a maid approached, introducing herself as Emma. "I believe Annie was responsible for the damaged shoes," she whispered to Claire. Surprised, Claire frowned. "Why are you telling me this?" Emma hesitated, glancing around. "Last night, I saw something." Annie had been spotted in the hallway holding a pair of scissors, her expression unusually somber. Emma, the new maid, was certain it was Annie who had destroyed the Duchess's shoes. Apparently, she had disliked Claire from the beginning. Yet Emma explained that, being new to the mansion, all she could do before was observe, but now, she wanted to help the Duchess. Claire appreciated the concern but remained cautious. "We shouldn't blame someone without proof," she said gently. "Simply holding scissors in the hallway isn't enough evidence. For now, I won't take this accusation seriously. But if you see anything else, you may tell me." Emma hesitated, then added, "Annie and I come from the same village. Back there, she often caused trouble." Claire nodded. "I'll be fine. To avoid stirring gossip, it's best you keep this to yourself for now." As they walked through the hall, Claire's eyes fell on a portrait of Ian as he assumed the title of Duke. She pondered Emma's story. Would Annie really do such a thing, despite all the help Claire had received from her? Annie was strict but had never shown malice. She worked diligently and cared for others. Claire decided it was best to stay silent for the moment. A few days later, the rumor had already spread among the staff. Annie had ruined the Duchess's shoes. Given her past reputation for letting Claire go hungry, the staff quickly believed it. Some even mocked Claire, calling her Annie's puppet. Annie confronted Claire in the office. "Why haven't you said anything about the rumors?" she asked. Claire replied calmly, I cannot stop people from talking. Annie looked dismayed that Claire neither cared nor fired her. Do you even know what they call me? She asked bitterly. Annie's puppet, coward, and others I can't recall. Why don't you do something? If you just fired me, it would probably solve the problem. Claire leaned back and asked, so the rumors are true? Was it really you who destroyed the shoes? Yes, Annie admitted reluctantly. Claire's voice was gentle but firm. There's no proof. Worried, Annie continued. If you don't fire me, the other staff won't respect you. Claire laughed lightly. They never respected you anyway. Annoyed, Annie slammed her hand on the table. How can you laugh at this? I resign. Claire noticed Annie's unusual behavior. Normally, she spoke while looking Claire in the eyes, but today she couldn't meet her gaze. You cannot resign, Claire said. Your current role is punishment for your past behavior. But if it really was you who ruined the shoes, you will be punished. Wait until there is proof. Annie agreed to wait a little longer, but warned that if nothing happened, she would go to the Duke herself to confess. Claire then asked, do you know the new maid, Emma? Are you close? Annie shrugged. We lived in the same village, but we're not close. Claire instructed Annie to call her later, noting that something still didn't feel right. Annie was checking the invitations that had begun arriving for the Ita household since the banquet. As Duchess, even for a year, Claire needed to participate in the tea parties and social events. Later, Emma approached Claire in the office. Is there anything you need, Duchess? Claire got straight to the point. Was it you who spread the rumors about the shoes? Emma shook her head. I only wanted to help. I asked around, trying to find out what happened, and I apologize if it caused trouble. Give me another chance, Emma pleaded. Let me stay by your side, and I'll get proof against Annie. Claire studied her carefully. Emma's desperation was clear. Being the lady of the house's personal maid was an honor, but in the Ita household, it also invited ridicule. Seeing Emma's determination, Claire decided to accept. Very well. It would be good to have one more person helping me. Later, Ian asked cautiously, Claire, are you really going to put Emma to work directly for you? Embarrassed that he had learned about the rumors, Claire tried to change the subject. I trust you, Ian said, smiling. You probably have a plan for Emma. But, do you really trust Annie? Claire nodded. Yes. If Annie truly hated me, she wouldn't have destroyed the shoes in such a sloppy way. Last time, she managed to starve me without the Duke noticing. This was callous compared to that. Ian suggested examining the shoes once more to see if they could find any clues. Claire agreed, knowing that a closer look might reveal more than appearances suggested. Arriving at the closet, they find May crying while sorting through the ruined shoes. When Claire asks what she is doing, May explains that she can't believe Annie would do such a thing and is trying to investigate. Since Annie always cared for the madam, even if she was strict, May insists it doesn't make sense. After checking the shoes again, she admits she finds nothing. Claire thanks her and reassures her they will find the culprit soon. With May's trust, Claire's doubts about Annie fade. The Duchess notices May's hands are red and itchy. Ian examines them and decides a doctor should take a look. The doctor diagnoses hives, typically caused by contact with plants or insects. May insists she hasn't touched anything like that, and the doctor reassures her it's not serious and provides medication. Afterward, Ian suspects the shoes might be involved. When he inspects them with a glove, it turns yellow, suggesting someone intended to harm Claire. They realize two people might be involved, one who applied the liquid and another who destroyed the shoes. Claire assures Ian she has a plan to reveal the culprit. Emma begins working as Claire's personal maid but immediately blames Annie or May for items that disappear from the Duchess and appear in their belongings. The Duchess pretends to favor Emma to see if this provokes a reaction, but Annie doesn't retaliate. Emma reports a missing lipstick and accuses Annie or May again, but Claire dismisses it, saying such small items aren't worth the stress. However, she notes that losing something valuable, like the sapphire necklace, would not be so easily overlooked. Emma smiles subtly, hinting she might cause trouble. During breakfast, the Duke asks if Claire will attend an afternoon tea, and she agrees, wanting to get used to it gradually. Ian mentions that she could host her own tea parties in the future, offering to help her practice conversation and even inviting Keith to participate. Claire notices that he has been more attentive lately, and their meals have become more enjoyable than at her parents' home. Suddenly, Emma rushes in, shouting that the sapphire necklace is missing. Claire confirms it and asks if anyone remembers touching it last. Ian agrees to investigate, with Annie and May's cooperation. After searching Emma and May's rooms without success, they find the necklace in Annie's closet. Emma immediately accuses Annie of stealing, but Annie admits only to ruining the shoes, prepared to accept any punishment. Claire expresses her disappointment but reveals she has an antidote, claiming she poisoned the necklace to catch the thief. Annie need not worry, as Claire saved an antidote in case she touched it. Before Annie can take it, Emma grabs it and drinks it in panic. Seeing the scene, the Duchess asks Emma to explain her actions. Emma claims she touched the necklace out of worry the previous night but insists she didn't steal it. Claire calmly reassures her, explaining that if there were any poison, symptoms would reveal the culprit. Annie advises Emma to give up, noting that since she didn't touch the necklace, she won't show any effects. Claire then asks Emma to tell the truth. Reluctantly, Emma admits she took the necklace because she couldn't stand Annie acting superior as the personal maid. The Duchess notices her red, inflamed hands and asks what caused it. Before Emma can fabricate an excuse, Claire points out that it's hives from the liquid on the ruined shoes. Trembling, Emma tries to blame Annie but is cut off. Claire asks the Duke to handle the rest. He calls 2 butlers to take Emma to the dungeon. Shocked, Emma protests, questioning why Annie's punishment had been lighter. Claire explains the difference, noting that Emma's repeated lies warranted stricter action. Emma is removed, screaming, while the Duchess turns to Annie for an explanation. Annie quietly explains that she and Emma were from the same village, and she owed Emma a debt in her mother's name. Seeing Emma tampering with the shoes, Annie destroyed them to hide the crime. The Duchess praises Annie for trying to protect them both but stresses the importance of honesty. Annie apologizes sincerely, and the Duchess decides her punishment will be 1 year without lying. Overwhelmed, Annie thanks the Duchess for her trust. May, curious, asks how Claire obtained poison for the necklace. Claire reveals there was never any poison, impressed by how accurately Annie assessed the situation. Later, in the Duke's office, Annie apologizes again. The Duke clarifies he isn't punishing her but wants to identify any remaining threats to Claire. He asks about the previous incident when the Duchess was made to starve. Annie confesses she destroyed the food after hearing staff planning to poison it with laxatives, then decided it was safer to starve Claire temporarily. Irritated at having missed this, the Duke instructs Annie to list everyone involved. He plans to watch them carefully rather than replace them immediately, mindful of Claire's perception. Annie agrees to keep an eye on the staff. Before leaving, Ian asks Annie if she knows what Claire likes. She replies that the Duchess prefers vibrant over flashy things but often downplays it. Ian reflects that Claire could use more confidence, and Annie hints that his love would greatly boost it. Even without fully understanding, Ian feels a strong desire to make Claire happy and see her smile. And that's where this part of the story ends. Personally, it's a very sweet and satisfying chapter. The romance's direction, whether Claire ends up with Ian or a twist with Keith, remains to be seen. Stay tuned for future episodes. If you love this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you, besties. Catch you on the next episode.